This is the 350 New Mexico Legislative Climate Action Training for 2023. And Jim McKenzie and I will be doing the presentation. What we'll be covering today is, and I will share my screen here, is this presentation. And we will post these slides on our website. And we will also post this recording on our website, and people can refer to it after we're done. So we will cover this agenda roughly, a brief legislative process overview, and spend a goodly amount of time talking about the resources that is going to be, and some of which is already on our climate action page, the 350 New Mexico Legislative Action for 2023 bills. And there's a page with a lot of links to it. We're going to actually talk about a new feature which we'll offer this time about texting. We'll talk about committee contacts and how you find committee schedules, how to attend and speak at a hearing, either in person or via Zoom, or how to attend a webcast. I talk about how we'll be communicating with all of you who are interested in signing up and receiving our updates. And then we'll close with a little bit of a detailed review of the top handful of climate and energy bills that we understand are being or will be introduced into this session. There will be more, but we'll cover kind of these top 5 for now. And we're going to start off with just some quick logistics. On the left side, you can see what the New Mexico Legislature's website looks like, and the location is nmlegis.gov. And you can see all of these pull-down menus here. If you go down to what's happening, you can find something called session dates, which are these. So these are the key dates for this legislative session in 2023. It will convene on January 17th. Bills are being pre-filed now through January 13th. And the deadline to introduce a piece of legislation is February 6th. And then the session will commence 5 days a week, sometimes 6 and maybe even 7, all the way through the end of the session at noon on March 18th. So basically, this is a 60-day session this time. Every other year, there's a 60-day and then a 30-day session. This is the long session this year. And Jim is going to discuss the graphic on the right-hand side, which is briefly how a bill becomes law. So, Jim?
Yeah, so this is just a brief outline. There is lots of sub steps or incremental steps for each one of these, but a bill is drafted, and that happens in a number of different ways, but we won't get into that part. So at some point during the legislature, and it's coming right up, there is a window that opens up that the bills can be introduced, and the lingo is they're dropped. That's the hip lingo at the Roundhouse. So you drop your bill, and the way you do that is you give a prescribed number of copies to the clerk, and that is if you can introduce it either into the House or the Senate, and occasionally bills are introduced into both chambers. And so the clerk records it and reads it out loud, and then the important step is when the officiating person of that chamber, that either is the in the House, it's the Speaker, and in the Senate, it's the pro tem. They assign the bills to committees, and this is a really important juncture because if it's a bill that they think is important and it should pass, they can grease the skids at this point and make it easy for the bill, or conversely, they can make it difficult for the bill. So then it goes to the proper committees and there's an order. And it gets handed from one committee to the next one. And the committees vote on the bill and they have to pass it out of committee. If it goes to have committee hearings, and the committee doesn't decide to pass it along to the next committee, the bill dies at that point. So the committee hearings are really where the rubber meets the road. And so we're going to make a big effort to have a presence, an informed presence in the committee hearings. And the committee hearings are oftentimes, there is a minimum time limit, but sometimes you only have overnight to show up. The schedule is published at the end of the day, and sometime mid-afternoon the next day is a hearing, an important hearing. So this is part of the reason we have a fairly nimble response communication system to talk to you all if you're involved. Once the bill gets through the hearings, gets passed out of each committee, it then goes to the floor. And then in the committee hearings or on the floor, the bill can be amended. And then when all that gets through, and let's say it's whatever happened in that chamber with those hearings and that floor action, you have a final result. And then normally it crosses over and goes to the other chamber. The same process, essentially, with different committees, different titles, different people, but the Senate pro tem, let's say, he or she decides which committees are going to go through, et cetera, et cetera. And then it goes to the floor. And so it's most often that the bill that started out on the left side here is been amended a number of times through the House committee, let's say. Then it goes to the Senate and it gets amended there. And so there has to be a reconciliation process if the results of the two chambers are different, which they usually are. And there's a committee that does nothing but do that. And then another vote, et cetera, and it gets through that whole process. And then the governor gets the option of signing or not signing it, or lots of other iterations of that. So that's kind of the overview of it. And the part we're going to focus on, by and large, are the committee hearings, because by and large, the members of the committee do pay attention to what the public has to say. And especially if their constituent contacts them and says, I'm for or against this bill, and I want you to do this or that. If you have 15 or 20 people chiming in on something, that is impactful. We've found that. That's not a theory. We've actually watched that in process. So that's kind of a quick thumbnail. And then if you want to get into complexity, you talk about appropriations, and I won't even go there because that is enormously complicated and really opaque. But this is the normal regular bills go through this process.
Thank you, Jim. So the gist of all of that is, for a bill to become law, it has to be passed in the same form with the exact same language through both the Senate and the House of Representatives, and with a majority vote on the floor, and then it goes to the governor, and then the governor has to sign it. The governor, of course, can veto it, but if it gets that far and the governor signs it, then it becomes law, and that's called being chaptered. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish with some of our key climate legislation this coming year. And we're going to talk now about what our website is going to look like and the tools that we're going to provide to enable all of us as good climate activists to engage and advocate for passing what we think are some of the key climate bills. So this is what our web page looks like, 350nm.org or 350newmexico.org. And if you go to our website and pull down this menu under Get Involved, you'll see at the top these two little links. The first is called Climate and Energy Bills 2023. And then there's another set of important bills called Rural Advocacy Bills 2023. We're just going to talk today about the climate and energy bills, but the same information applies to a related but slightly different set of bills that are important to rural New Mexico. And they will be bills related to water, for example, clean air, maybe public lands, etc. And we have a rural advocacy team advocating for those. So you'll see both of those. And if you then scroll down on that page, this is the climate and energy bills page, you'll see this text, and it's, has a little bit of introductory explanatory wording, and some live links where you can click. So if you want to join our legislative action team, click there. If you want to see this presentation, we'll have a link on this page right there where you can review what the training materials are. And then there's some other links that we'll show you later on in the coming slides, where we'll have committee contact information, where you can look up your legislator or others on a key committee, link to abbreviations so that you know what SCONC and HREF and all of these other 5-letter acronyms stand for, and then how to view committee schedules. And then, of course, the other rural outreach bills will be there as well. This is the list of top climate and energy bills that we will cover at the end of the presentation today, but I just want to give you a sense that we've already identified quite a number of them, and we'll come back to this slide before we're done. But Climate Solutions Just Transition Act, Geothermal Resource Development, Water Resilience Planning, Oil and Gas Act Reform, and Climate and Public Health Resilience. And on our webpage, you will see those bills and others in a table that will show you, that will look like this. It'll have the bill ID and a link to the bill number, the bill title, the bill sponsor, and we're just going to use their last names. So, this, for example, is Senator Ortiz y Pino. This will be Representative Liz Thompson. And then the location will show you, almost always, it'll be a listing of a committee name. So, and it'll be the acronym for that committee. So you may see SCONC, which stands for Senate Conservation. And we will be using those abbreviations. You'll become familiar with them. And as we showed you earlier, if you want to know what those abbreviations mean, you go click on link to abbreviations. Okay, and then the last column here where it says scheduled will be the best information that we have on when we believe that bill will show up next and be reviewed in its next committee. So it may say, for example, SCONC February 2nd at 9 a.m. And so that means the bill will be on the agenda for Senate Conservation 9 a.m. February 2nd. And then that's where you want to go. Okay. We also have a link on our webpage to information like what I'm showing you here, which is a extensive Google Doc, and it's probably got about 10 different committees that, in our experience, is where our bills go to. Conservation, the House Energy and Natural Resources Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, things like that. And so each one of those will have, of course, its membership, and we have their members listed here with the name, district number, their party, their role, chair, vice chair, or a member, and importantly, their phone number in the Capitol building. So if you want to call them, you can either speak to them in person or more likely just leave a message. That's the number to reach. or send them an email at this number. And for some legislators, they actually have a Twitter account, and we will list their Twitter handle. So if you want to tweet at them with your preference here, you can do that too. Okay, so you can find that information on our 2023 legislative action page. You can use these links to contact the legislators and figure out when the bills are going to show up. You can find the schedules under view schedules, for example, there. That'll actually take you to the committee, legislature's website, where the schedules will be listed. And the committees themselves, might as well launch it here. This takes you to that Google Doc. And as I said, it's got about 10 different committees. The Senate committees are at the top. The House committees are starting at around row 55. And this is accurate as of best information we have now, but they will not post the information for anybody who changed due to the last legislative election until they convene in the middle of January on the 17th. And so we'll update this and it'll be current at that time. So it says here, update for 2023 in progress. So that's how you contact committee members. And here's some good advice that we got yesterday from Javier Martinez. A very effective way to email your legislators. So if you want to advocate to pass one of these key bills, highly recommended that you put the bill number in the email title, because that is in fact how they sort the comments that they're going to review. So they may, say, okay, I'm going to go into this Senate Conservation Committee on Tuesday morning. I'd like to get a download on what my constituents or other interested parties are saying about it, and they will sort their emails by subject line, and they will search for HB 42, for example. And so please help yourself out. Put the HB 42 in the subject line. And here's an example of an email that you might send to Senator Bill Sewells. Please vote yes on HB 42, the Climate and Public Health Resilience Act. And that way they'll be able to find the comments that you've made, and it'll be at their fingertips for when they go in to vote on the bill. Attending a committee hearing can be done in person at the Roundhouse, and it's a great experience for people if you haven't done it before, or old veterans who've done it many times. You get to see the legislators up front, up close. You may be able to speak to them in between hearings or when they're on recess. And you can make a in-person public comment in the hearing. So they will often, almost always, before they vote on a bill, they'll have a section designated for public comments, and people can queue up in the room and come up to the microphone, make their public comment. Could be 1 minute, could be 3 minutes. It's usually about that short. So draft your comment to make your point in advance, and then say your piece, and then they'll call up the next commenter. Often, and probably again, they will make provisions for some people to attend committee hearings by Zoom as well. I think we're a bit in flux with that one because COVID is not quite as serious as it's been in the last couple of years. And we believe that some of the committees will allow Zoom comments again, but it may actually differ by chamber. It seems like it's maybe more likely to happen in the House and the Senate, but we're not 100% sure, and we're just going to play that by ear. But that's how it's been in the last couple of years. It's been very convenient. I think if they were to cancel it completely, there would be a hue and cry among the citizenry, but we've been hearing a little bit of a conflicting, not quite sure, and I think maybe they just haven't completely made up their mind. But we are anticipating that probably you can still attend and comment by Zoom. And the best way to do it if you want to make a Zoom comment, is to contact the committee legislative staff and tell them in advance that you want to make a comment. And this particular page gives you a little bit of information about how to do that. This is what a sample committee schedule looks like when they publish it on their website. This happens to be from 2021 for the Senate Conservation Committee. And they give you, in this case, 2 days worth of hearings. So this committee met on a Tuesday and a Thursday. That was their regular schedule. And they scheduled this list of bills on Tuesday and that list of bills on Thursday. But what always happens is that they say, we're going to review all of these bills, but in fact, maybe they only get through half of them. And then they have to roll the remaining bills into the later session in the week. So that's one reason why we always update our website every night to give people the best information we have on what we really expect to happen, especially towards the end of the week. And at the bottom, you'll see this, what I've highlighted in the red box. For public participation, send an email for the above agenda items to this website. That this happens to be sconc@nmlegis.gov. That goes to the legislative council assistant for that committee. And you just tell them, what's your name, who you're representing, what bill you want to speak on, for or against. And then they will know to expect you to show up on Zoom. And they will make some provisions for how much time to allocate to public comments based on the advanced interest expressed in making those public comments. And highly recommended to do that. It's always good to, establish some kind of a relationship with the committee staff. They like to hear from you, and you may be able to get into a little bit of an email exchange if you have a question or two, but it's a useful thing to do. Okay. Communications during the session. We will provide a weekly email blast, kind of updating what some of these key bills are and where things are standing and what the priorities are. We're going to talk in a subsequent page about a new feature that we're going to offer, which is direct text action alerts for those who want to opt in and provide a cell phone number where we can text you at. And of course, our webpage will be live and we'll update it every evening with the latest bill and committee information. To opt in for text updates, we're going to do this. I'm going to cover it briefly and then I'll let Jim add his commentary in, because Jim is actually working behind the scenes to make this happen. But if you go on our main webpage on the front of our website, the home page, if you scroll down below this, then you'll get to a section where you can fill in your name and email and phone number for to be on our distribution list. There's a new checkbox. And so basically there's two things you got to do. If you want to opt in for texting, you have to check this text box that says opt in for texts, and you have to enter in your cell phone number in the space where it says put your phone in. Okay, and then click add your name. Once you've done that, then your opt-in information with your cell phone will go into our database, and it's that database that Jim is going to use to send out texts. And Jim, I'll turn it over to you briefly if you want to say any additional words about this.
Yeah, so the reason that we're trying this out this year is, as I mentioned at the outset, some things get happening pretty quickly, especially when time gets short near the end of the session. Some people use email on their phone, some people don't. It's just everybody has a different communication style, and we thought that giving people the option of getting updates, strategic and short-term updates on their phone might help. This is a theory, so it's going to be up to you to use this feature. And at this point, we plan just to use it during the session. Normally, we use email, although after the session, we may query everybody and see again whether they'd like to have general updates on their phone or stick with the email. We're going to try to be very respectful of people's cyberspace and don't overload it. One thing we can promise you, we're not going to ask you for money on your phone. So you can take that to the bank.
Thank you, Jim. And I think there's some fine print that we normally add, which is, I think, normal message data rates may apply if you opt in for the text, but they'll be tiny typically. So this is a new feature that we'll have. There's also going to be a couple of days of action related to climate and the environment coming up in February. These are hosted by the Sierra Club, our good allies. And February 9th is going to be Lands, Water, and Wildlife Day. And February 23rd is going to be Climate Solutions and Just Transition Day, which is likely to be our top priority bill. And if you'd like to attend, that'd be great. I will put in the chat the link to this volunteer form. So if you want to go up and assist the Sierra Club in, setting up for the event, volunteering to be a citizen lobbyist and go around and knock on your senators or representatives' door and help lobby for some of these key bills. That's basically the main activity for these days, in addition to just visiting all of the environmental booths and organizations that will be up there. And this is the section where we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about our top bills. And I'll cover a couple, Jim will cover a couple, and we have another page or two with some additional information, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So as we say, this is a preliminary list. Bills can still be filed through February 16th, but we believe these 5 bills are likely to be close to the top of our priorities for this session. And the top one will be the Climate Solutions and Just Transition Act. There was an earlier version of this attempted to be passed in the last session. I think it was HB 6, the Climate Solutions Act. So it's starting with that experience and that drafting language, but basically it's trying to align state policy and put some teeth into regulatory action that will help us meet the intent of the Paris Climate Accords to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, limit carbon emissions throughout many economic sectors to try to make that happen. So an important bill. And it will have just economic transition provisions in there as well, so that environmental justice communities are treated as they should be. The second bill is one that I've been drafting with the help of Senator Ortiz-Pino, or rather, I've been helping Senator Ortiz-Pino draft this bill. It's been a lot of fun. It's called the Geothermal Resource Development Act, and it's to promote the development of New Mexico's geothermal heat and electricity resources. And there's actually a webinar that the senator and I and the expert state geophysicist Sherry Kelly will host this Thursday evening on January 12th. And there's a QR code right there, and I'll put the link to sign up to that in the chat as well. So love to have people join us for that. There's actually, I think maybe what I'm going to do is skip the Water Resilience Planning Act, and we'll have maybe we'll ask Ann to come off a mute after we talk about the next two and speak specifically about that. Ann McCartney is much more of an expert about that particular bill. So we'll go down to the Oil and Gas Act Reform Act, and Jim, I put together that slide that you wanted right here.
Okay.
So I want you to speak to that bill.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, this is a very important, we think, a very important piece of legislation, because the basic foundation of the way oil and gas development is run in this state was set up in 1935. As you might imagine, it needs some fixing. And this bill is not proposing to fix everything, but it's gonna, if it's passed, it's gonna fix some important things. So one of the odd things that happened in 1935, which the big concern was to encourage production of oil and gas. And so that was the purpose of the law, to encourage production. And that was the only purpose of the law and the only consideration that the agencies and the courts could bring to bear. So, you know, we now know that there are other considerations that are necessary. And so this act will hopefully fix some of those things. In other words, you have to also take in the public health risks, the environment risks, when you're making decisions about permitting oil and gas. Absolutely essential. So that's the change, a foundational change. And then in addition, there are changes that will enable a broader group of citizens and people in the state to have a say in the oil and gas development. So instead of just having the industry and the regulators on the various boards and panels, it will expand out that membership. It's also going to create a new Environmental Justice Advisory Council, again, which is another way of bringing other considerations to bear on the decisions besides production. There are also going to be important parts of the statute that protect the public from the bad effects of living in the front line, living next to the oil and gas. And I'm guessing that a lot of you know some of that detail. You can imagine having your kids go to a school and there's an oil well 750 feet from the elementary school or from your house, etc. So this is going to take a lot of work, as you can imagine. The industry is not going to be pleased with this. I haven't seen any official statements by the industry, but we're anticipating some pretty strong pushback. I think we have a good base in the legislature for some optimism that there are people, legislators, who will support us on this. And for those that are waffling, that's when the phone calls and the writing and the discussions will be very important.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, so this is probably going to be one of the big fights, and we'll really need people to raise their voices and say, this is important, get it done. Let's see, as I mentioned, that's the Zoominar for geothermal. The fourth bill, and we'll come back to the water bill when we're done with this, is the Climate and Public Health Resilience Act, which is sponsored by Representative Liz Stefanik's and Representative Liz Thompson and Senator Liz Stefanik's, the two Liz's. And it does a couple of things. It funds a Department of Health-based climate and public health program. It establishes that program, does an appropriation to give it some funding to make sure that human beings that are undergoing impacts to their public health, to their health, because of the impacts of climate change, actually have some recourse within the Department of Health, and they start planning for it and can take account of those impacts. And that should be an important bill. Ann McCartney, are you on the call, and would you like to come off of mute and speak to the Water Resilience and Planning Act?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
So the Water Resilience Planning Act is coming out of the recommendations from a water policy task force that was convened on the behest of the governor by the state engineer. So it was a diverse group of stakeholders who came together for months in 2022 and unanimously developed a fairly comprehensive set of recommendations. This Planning Act is aimed primarily to address recommendation 2.2, which is to elevate regional water planning, which has been in place but has never been something that's actually used. Reports were created and put on the shelf. This is to establish a framework for state-funded regional water resilience plans that will be community-driven, science-based, focused on resilience in the face of water scarcity. And it also directs the Interstate Stream Commission to establish state rules for funding and approving water infrastructure projects. So, well, the third piece is that it prioritizes state capital outlay for vetted and approved projects. So it's an important bill because of our crisis that we're facing in terms of water resources availability. It is at this point sponsored by Senator Stefanik's. It's got a long haul to go, so really appreciate people getting out and supporting good water planning as this moves through committee.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, and I think that may be pretty much what we had. And I am going to, I think, stop sharing my screen. I promised that I would put some of the links from this material in the chat so that people can sign up for various events or have ways to go to. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A. And if maybe if people want to just use the chat to say, you know, I have a question, and then we'll call on you. We can create a little bit of a stack and then just go through them in some kind of an orderly fashion. How about that? So who was the first? And Jim, would you like to maybe curate the questions real quickly while I look for some of these links?
Sure. There were some good points in the chat, some questions and some good points. Clearly, we have an experienced, a bunch of experienced people with us this afternoon. Athena made a good point that during committee hearings, the chair of the committee will ask for either opposition or support of a bill, sometimes a show of hands. So they take a poll. And you'll notice when you sign up for a Zoom spot, for a Zoom comment, you put down you oppose or you support. So this is a useful way that the committee takes kind of a straw poll, and it sounds kind of frivolous, but I want to assure you it's not. You know, you see a bill that has everybody in the committee room and online against it, except a couple of lobbyists who are on somebody's payroll. That makes an impression. It definitely makes an impression. So that's a good point, Athena. And while I'm talking about, I just want to digress a little bit and make a pitch for people who can, you know, there's health questions about being there in person, but important things happen in the legislature, and I'm sure a number of you have been there and know this. So there are things that happen in the hallway, the committee is adjourned, and you catch one of your legislators. They have their own elevators, so they don't always aren't out in the hall. But there's a lot of communication. A lot of the interesting things happen in the roundhouse, in the hallways, between meetings. So participating in that can be fun. All of a sudden you realize you're standing next to the Secretary of Health, and you say, "Excuse me, Secretary, do you have just a minute?" And you pitch them on something. And then after the session, you do a follow-up. And so there's lots of stuff that can go on there. So again, if you can, even for a couple of days, make it up to Santa Fe. It'll be interesting. I will be up there quite a bit, and I'd like to see you up there. There's always the bull ring after it's adjourned for the day, and we can meet over there and figure out how the world works. So, what else?
There's a question, Jim, on the Green Amendment. Let me just answer that. So 350 New Mexico has supported the Green Amendment the last two sessions. It will be on our list of bills that we support. In addition, we are not the lead organization that's out front supporting it. That's why it's not in our top 5, but we are certainly one of the supporters of the Green Amendment. So when we have an expanded list of bills, you will see some that are kind of our top priority, and then others that we're supporting would anticipate the Green Amendment will be in that expanded list. And Sarah, I see your hand up. Did you have a question?
I thank you. I think you just answered it, because I was wondering, knowing that you were part of the working group that's working on the modernization of our legislature project. So I assume that is going to be something that you support, but you're not the lead on that.
Yes, and it's a little, yeah, that one's a little bit in a separate category. Modernizing the New Mexico legislature is one of those overarching system changes that, could be a major change in the way the whole system works that enables many other good things to happen. But it is not specifically a climate or energy bill,
Right,
which is what our website is for. So, but I will certainly be advocating for it, and we hope that others will as well. So that's kind of our stance. It may not show up. It may not show up on our main climate page. But Anne and Steffi, maybe we can put the modernizing the legislature on the rural outreach page, so it's at least there as well.
So Sarah, just let me add to that. It's not easy for us to winnow down the dozens and dozens of good bills that are worthy of support. We have found in the past that focus is a virtue. So rather than support everything that's good, we support stuff that's in our wheelhouse that we can talk about until we're blue in our face and convince people and the legislature and make expert testimony and all that kind of stuff. So we don't want to ignore anything, but we are leaving some of the good stuff to other people to be experts on that rather than us.
thank you.
Thanks, Jim.